fortunate this morning to hear from an incredible educator, Lori Wyborney.
So I know you probably noticed I brought my phone. I have to because I need to have a timer. I have a tendency to really like to talk about my school. So I'm, on kind of I know you guys have lots to do today, so I am keeping myself on a timer. Thank you, Mike. I have known Mike a long time. We actually grew up in rival high schools as well. He at Medical Lake, where his dad was the superintendent, me at Cheney, where my dad was the athletic director. And there was some pretty vicious rivalries that went on between those two schools. So it kind of comes full circle to have his son back in my school, who, by the way, is doing his admin internship right now with me as well. So it's been really fun to be able to boss Chris around and tell him to do all the things I don't want to do. It's worked out really well for me. I actually have 3 interns, so I'm hardly doing anything right now. It's perfect. I wanted to start by saying when I was called to speak, first of all, I had no idea what that WASWUG even stood for. That's hilarious, by the way. I love your acronym. Education's so full of them. I love them. But I was like, well, gosh, why do you want me to talk? And as they talked to me about some of the work that you do, it made a lot of sense to me, because really what I'm going to talk about today is the end result of all the work that you do behind the scenes. And I for my school especially, the work that you do, and it's wide-ranging from, school lunches to data to attendance to everything that you do, really does make my job a little bit easier so that I can serve the kids. But what you do really matters. And you'll see here in a little bit, in my school in particular, it really did matter a lot, the work that you guys do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where we started, and where we needed to go, how we got there, and then I'm going to show you a couple of students and where they're at right now, because they're really what this is all about, and they're why we do what we do in this profession at all. So Rogers is located in Northeast Spokane, and on any given year, it is one of the top 3 poorest zip codes in the state of Washington for a lot of reasons. And it didn't always used to be that way. It was, at one time, you had a huge Kaiser Mead Works out there and a lot of railroad stuff. So it was just a working class neighborhood. But in the 80s, when those kind of things folded, it changed that neighborhood significantly. You could drive for blocks in Northeast Spokane and you will see no businesses. It is just a lot of homes, about 48% of them are rentals. It's really been tough on kids. So about 10 years ago, we started this journey at Rogers, and we had to face where we were at. I mean, we all do when you start something. You have to face what you have as your reality so that you know what you're going to do to make a change. And we were looking at a lot of not good statistics. We had about 1,600 suspensions. Now, I'm being a little bit nice there because the year before I put that in there, we had 1,800. 1,800 suspensions in a school of 1,600 kids. Now, that doesn't mean that every kid got suspended, because I very specifically remember one kid who was suspended 33 times. I don't know why I'm laughing at that, but in my head, I remember at one point in time we all looked at each other and said, I don't think we're modifying his behavior at all. If we're suspending him 33 times, I don't think this is working. And clearly it wasn't. But there was, our students were known for fighting. There was a significant amount of truancy. It was at that point in time before our remodel. It was really easy to skip school. And drugs, of course, were another part that impacted my students significantly. Our test scores were not great, particularly in math and science. We sat around 21%. That's so bad. English was a little bit better. Reading and writing was a little bit better, but I mean, really, 60%, come on, that's just not good enough. And then you'll see this here in a little bit, but we had grad rates for about 4 years that sat around 50%. 50%. 50% of our students did not graduate from high school. That is pathetic. You can't have that. That doesn't work for our world. I mean, I plan to retire someday. We can't have that. It's not going to help my retirement at all. So, I mean, it was a little selfish in some of the things I'm thinking here. The other thing, in Spokane is really interesting. There are 5 comprehensive high schools in Spokane Public Schools and several outlying districts. No matter what directions my students turn, they are facing affluence. Not where they're at, where they look. To the east, to the north, to the south, to the way west. It is really hard for my students. And what's really interesting, most of my students born and raised here in Spokane. And every year we graduate right across the street here at the IMB Center. And I probably have 25 to 50 parents who say, where is that? Because they've never been downtown Spokane. I mean, you're talking, you are 5 miles, maybe a little less, from here to where my school is. And I have parents who have never been downtown. One time our football team was playing up on the South Hill. Our JV football team was playing Lewis and Clark. And one of our kids broke his leg. Coach calls the parent, says, hey, you got to come get him. You got to take him to the doctor. Dad says, we don't go on the South Hill. We actually had to bring the kid down to the bottom of the hill, that's where the freeway is around here, and meet the dad so that he could take him to the doctor. I mean, that's just where we're at with our families and with our kids. But the positive side of that is the people who live in Northeast Spokane are incredibly proud of that area, and they're proud to live there. And while Spokane is a district of school choice, my students choose to come to our school. They choose it. They have lots of options, but they choose it. I never worry about our enrollment or anything because I know they'll show up. They might be a little late, but they'll show up. You know, that's just what we do. So this zip code, the 99207 zip code that is the feeder pattern to my school, looks a little bit different than the state of Washington. About 35% of my students live below the U.S. poverty line. Now, keep in mind, the U.S. poverty line was made when I was born 55 years ago, which seems a little ridiculous. But I have about 35% of my kids living below 22,400. Our free and reduced sits between 78 and 79 all the time. Every feeder school, I have 8 feeder elementary schools and 2 feeder middle schools. Every one of them sits between 75 and 85. So it's going to look like that all the time. The median income in 99207 is $33,000. In the state of Washington, it's anywhere from $56,000 to $62,000. So it's significantly less. And what's more interesting about that is that 86% of the people who are 25 and older living in the 99207 zip code have actually graduated from high school. They've gotten a GED or whatever, or now they're actually graduating from our high school, and they have a 2-year degree, and still the median income is $33,000. That really dictates to us what our work is at our school. We have a really high number of SPED. It sits between 21 and 23%. This year we're pushing a little bit over 23 right now. We have a pretty significant ELD population, or ELL, whichever way you guys use it. And in Spokane, you know, when I was at WASWUG, which is in central Washington, it was 90% Latino. So, you know, you had one language you had to deal with. Here, our ELD population, in my school alone, 17 different languages. So it's significantly difficult. Most of you probably have heard of the COE, which is the collection of evidence that students have to take if they don't pass the state test. So the COE is another option for them to get through the state assessment. Our COE classes are about 95% ELD kids. So, you know, it just kind of indicates where they're at. And a lot of them are coming to us from refugee camps. That's kind of what the new ELD kid looks like here in Spokane. 35% of my students, at least, have experienced complex trauma. So if you take a test and they say, your parents divorced, have you ever been hungry, have you ever seen violence, have you ever dealt with drugs, and there's like 10 of them. If you say yes to any 4, you are considered to have experienced complex trauma. At least 35% of my students have experienced that. Complex trauma to a child changes their brain, and it impacts the way they react and the way that they think and the way that they learn. And so in my school, we have to work a little differently with our students because knowing that they're in complex trauma. When I first came to Rogers, the police loved to rush up and park right in the front of our building. And students in my school would totally shut down. They just they'd freeze. And it's because police officers to them did not represent safety. It represented something else, because about a third of my students' parents are incarcerated. So it just seemed different to them. We work with the police department a lot, and now we do programs with them where they're working with our students. It's made a huge difference for a ton of our kids to see police officers as people who will help and will support, and that's been a really big thing for our kids. And then my kids walk through 5 of the 6 highest crime zones in Spokane. Just this week, I'm dealing with this textbook issue. You guys will appreciate this because this is right in your wheelhouse. So, you know, the school district buys textbooks, right? Yeah, 5 comprehensive high schools. So it used to be that we could just trade textbooks back and forth. Of course, that drove downtown crazy because, who knows where the books are? So they changed the policy, and they said, you have to re-buy the books. The district's already bought the books. Now we need some books. We have to buy them again. And in my school, we lose a lot of books. In fact, because of that, 5 of the 6 highest crime zones, I can't tell you how many of my kids' cars get broken into, and they steal the backpack. Now, I'm pretty sure people aren't stealing it for the textbooks. They want the devices that are in there, I'm sure, but, oops, sorry, my bad. I knew that would happen. And so, you know, we lose a lot of books. And so right now I have a French class that doesn't have any French books. Well, Ferris up on the South Hill has a ton of French books, but they need German books, which we have a ton of German books. We can't exchange those so simply, right? And part of it is because the district's kind of pushing back on the fact that we lose so many books, but I keep pushing back saying, hi, my kids are walking through 5 of the 6 highest crime zones. What do you expect? That'll be a fun little battle for us, I'm sure. I plan on winning, by the way. That's always my plan, right? Right? So that, by the way, too, this is just a recent statistic I just got a couple weeks ago. In the 99207 zip code right now, 16.2% unemployment. The state of Washington just dropped to 5.7. Really disappointing. So we knew. I went to my staff and I said, hey, this doesn't work. We can't do this to our kids. We have to be better. We have to figure this out. And you know what? The great thing was I only lost 1 staff member because we gave them a choice. This is the work we're going to do, and it is not going to be easy. If you want to go, the district's going to give you a transfer. Only 1 guy transferred out. It's great. Although I secretly kind of wish a couple others did, but they didn't let me pick. It was weird. I would have liked to have been able to pick. Oh, well. You don't get everything. Well, so we really had to look at our culture. You know, Rogers, the staff at Rogers has always been really great. But I would say at one point in time, they were super loving with low expectations. And that had to change. Kids aren't going to excel in low expectations, ever. And so we really talked a lot about the moral imperative. What we do matters. And what we say to kids and how we do it makes a difference. And if we're going to make a difference, then we got to do work differently. And luckily, my staff totally bought into this. My first year as a principal, we decided that we would write a federal grant. That was when the Obama administration was giving out the Race to the Top money. And we ended up with a little more than $4 million to work on improving our school. And it was a lot of work. We worked with the local union. We worked with all the folks like you downtown. To make this work, because, well, first of all, it was $4.4 million. That's a lot of money that somebody has to manage, because you don't want me to manage it. I like shoes too much. You do not want me, and I like to gamble, so. I could double it for you, I said. They didn't take me up on it, wisely. So we started to talk about all students. It can't just be some students. It can't be the students we pick. It can't be the students, just the students we like, or the students that smell good, or the students that come to us totally ready for school. It had to be all students. And that's really, we started a vision, 7 years ago, and it hasn't changed. I say to the students, I say to the staff, I say to the parents all the time, this is what we do here. All students graduate on time. All students meet all standards, whatever the state's going to do. It used to be reading, writing, math. Now we just say whatever the state says. And all kids will graduate college and career ready. And that's as simple as it is. We don't do anything super fancy, but that's really the mantra that we have stuck with the entire time. And so far it's worked. And we've had to do a lot of work around mindset. And what does it mean? What is our bias about poverty and kids that live in low socioeconomic homes? What is our bias about that? And what are we going to do about that? And does that bias impact the way we teach? And I can tell you it does. So we work a lot of that. I can tell you that when we interview people for our jobs, we ask questions that every time people go, wow, no one's ever asked me that. We'll ask questions like, why are people poor? We'll ask questions like, what was the one that really we asked them, what do you do if a kid comes to you and they smell really bad? And people are just blown away because they know that there's a trick to it, I guess. It's not really a trick because there's really a right answer. But they see it that way. But I ask very few content questions. I look at their resume. I know they can teach whatever content it is. I need to know, can they teach our students? That's the difference. And it is about mindset. We also had to look at our academics. We eliminated all remedial classes. There's not one remedial class at Rogers. Not one. We had something called outdoor living. I called it camping 101. That is not a science class, people. We got rid of it. We really have pushed advanced placement. You're going to see some data in a couple minutes about what we've done with advanced placement. This district supports advanced placement in STEM pretty extensively. So I have biomedical, Project Lead the Way Biomedical, which is really good in Spokane because it's a big medical town. We have pre-engineering, who just made me a really cool Eastern thing, by the way. And we're working on a computer science Project Lead the Way pathway for kids as well. So we really pushed that. And we started an instructional frame that is common among all our teachers. We're not going to tell you how to teach it, but we're going to all try to kind of teach similarly so that students understand the structure and the structure doesn't change class to class, because that's hard for kids. We also had to look at discipline. I mean, come on, 1,600 suspensions. It's ridiculous. So we raised the expectations. And you know what's really interesting? People really fought us on this. Adults fought us on this. Kids never did, not once. Not once did they say, no, I'm not going to behave. They never said that to us. No, I'm not going to fight. They were like, okay, if this is what you want us to do, we'll do it. And they've done it all along the way. It's been amazing. So we raised expectations, but we also provide our kids with a ton of support. I have a social worker, mental health therapist, a 27-member counseling team. I have people who work with specific demographics like African American or Native American or Hispanic or ELD. And we have to have those kind of supports for our kids because that's the only way you can do high expectations with kids that are coming to you from complex trauma and poverty. So we told kids we're not going to have fighting. In fact, there was a time when 200 kids sat on a corner of Pittsburgh and Heroy, right on one of our corners, and watched two girls fight. Maybe the men understand this. I don't get it. I've never understood I don't know how anybody likes to watch anybody fight. But two girls, they are so bad at fighting. They're the worst fighters I've ever seen. And yet people will just rush to go see two girls fight. I've never understood it. There is a Seinfeld episode, though, about it. You should watch that because it explains, I think, what men like about that. It's weird, whatever it is. Anyway, we also decided that we had open lunch, and we were finding that a lot of our 9th and 10th graders were making our neighborhood mad because they were hanging out in alleys. Nothing good ever happens in an alley for a high school kid. And so we closed lunches to 9th and 10th graders. We separated our lunches, 9th and 10th grade one, 11th and 12th another, closed it for 9th and 10th graders, had a 60% reduction in drug use just with that alone. That's insane. We put a ton more support. My district was super supportive about this. They gave us a lot more support in student services so that we could support our kids so they can be better. And now, as you all know, the new trend is the restorative practices. And you're going to see where we are with suspensions. It's been pretty remarkable what we've done, but it's been with a lot of hard work, working with our community and a lot of community entities, working with our students, working with our parents, and working with our district. And then, of course, we had to work on grad rates because they were so pathetic. So we changed the way counselors worked. Counselors used to just really work in scheduling. We hired someone else to do that. I wanted my counselors to work with students because kids will perform when they have a dream. When they know what they want to do, they will take 4 years of science. They'll take 4 years of math, even though the requirement's 3 and 3. They'll do it because they know it's good for them. And so we really pushed our counseling staff to change the way that they do work, and they do groups now, and they work with kids one-on-one a ton. They aren't just college and career, although they do a lot of that. They do a lot of the social emotional support as well. We also hired academic mentors for specific demographics because, I don't know if you've noticed, Spokane's pretty white, 89%, I believe. My school, though, is 43% of diversity. So my school looks a lot different from Spokane. And those students felt not listened to, and they were right. And so we had to take a look at that and say, what are we going to do differently? And so we've hired people who work with our demographic, who work with our families, and help us support them better. And it's been beautiful, it really has. We're constantly playing with the freshman year, trying to make the freshman year a place where kids are going to learn how to be a good student. And it's never easy because, gosh darn those freshmen, they like to be naughty. You know, it's funny, every year I tell them, I meet them in the spring, and every year I say, I have heard you guys are the best class ever, and we are so excited to have you. This last year I said that, and all the 8th grade teachers went, I knew we were in trouble. That was bad. I got to teach those teachers not to do that. And then, of course, we got the federal grant, which we extended our school day, we extended our school year. All those things really helped us get that bounce we needed to be able to turn our school around. And it's still a work in progress. We have a lot of work still to do, but we're going in the right direction for sure. So this is our graduation rates from 07 to last year, and the 81% you're seeing there, it's actually 81.2%, is not necessarily final, but it's the latest one that I have. You're kind of seeing a pattern there for sure. I know I am. One that I don't like, 70, 80, 70, 80. 70. So we have a lot of work still to do here when we're looking at 18% of our students still not graduating on time. We have to fix that. We have to. And so we're looking at some deeper dives into who are those kids and why aren't we supporting them better. I do think restorative practices is going to bump that number up. I really do. So that's a good thing. This is what discipline looks like now from 1,629 last year. For a total year, we only had 430. Right now, we are sitting at a total of 12 suspensions. Last year, we were at 35 at this time. So restorative practices is working. I do think it is the best way that we are going to be able to get kids to be in the classroom, getting the content and the skills that they need to be successful. And you know, it's actually been really good for the adults too, for us to be able to just talk to kids and find out what is going on. We're finding out so many things we did not know, and that's been good for us as well. This is what advanced placement looks like. Again, going back to 09 through 16, just the number of AP students we have, to the number of exams that are taken. We last year went through a process with equal opportunity schools to increase the number of kids and close the achievement gap, or the opportunity gap for our students, and we were able to do that. So we totally closed the opportunity gap at our school last year. And so that's why you're seeing a little bit of rises in both the number of tests taken. It's even up now more. So right now in the fall of 16, we had 372 last year. We have 428 right now in advanced placement. Probably means somewhere in the neighborhood of 650 to 700 tests. And then we got to work on that percent who's passed. Because really, my kids come to us with some gaps in learning, and we're still pushing them into advanced placement. And I tell them, we push you because I want you to be able to choose. When you graduate, I want you to stand on that stage at the IMB and be able to say, I want to whatever, and be able to do it because we've pushed so hard and we've prepared you for that. And they get that. Last year's class, 89% of my students took 4 years of science, which they only need 3, and 87% of them took 4 years of math, which they only need 3. That's a pretty good push for kids. Keeping in mind that I have an enormous amount of special ed kids that have to do some other things. So it really was, they're amazing kids. They've done really well for us. This is a quote I like. Our country has been hard I think, on people in poverty. For whatever reason, I don't even debate it anymore. Well, I will, but not right here. But what we forget all the time is that no kid chooses their parent. I didn't choose mine. I just got lucky. They don't choose theirs, and sometimes they're not as lucky. And we can't let that be the reason why kids don't succeed. It just can't be an excuse anymore. It just can't. I get there's all kinds of stuff we could talk about, what's wrong with all the things that goes on up in Northeast Spokane, but my kids don't choose it. And they do want something better. But we have to show them the way. That's what we have to do. And I have a great staff who have just been amazing with our kids. And it's the reason why we've been able to push and get a little bit better. So let's meet a couple kids. Alyssa is one of the unusual kids in my school. She is not on free and reduced. I have about 80% free and reduced in my school. Her family does not qualify. She lives with her biological mom and dad. Her dad owns a truck driving business. She plans to go to college to study nursing. And what's interesting about Alyssa, a couple weeks ago, a boyfriend broke up with her, and I happened to be in the hallway, and she was crying, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? Why are you crying? Oh, so-and-so broke up with me. I'm like, big deal. He's an idiot. Who cares? and she was like, yeah, you're right. And she got over it. That is not true with my kids in complex trauma. It's a lot more dramatic than that. So it's nice to have this one kid who I can just say, he's an idiot. And she'll, oh, yeah, okay, that's great. Move on. Love that about Alyssa. But she's the unusual kid. She's one of a few in my school. This is Moselle. I meet Moselle because Moselle almost every day needs money to ride a bus. She doesn't live real close to the school. The school bus doesn't go where she lives, so she has to ride the STA. Her mom does live in Spokane. She has not seen her mom in years because her mom is a crack addict, and she had to move in with her dad and her 5 half-siblings. It's not an easy life for this young lady, but I'll tell you what, she pushes, and she will go to college. She's amazing. Love that kid. Quentin. Oh my gosh, this kid, when he was a freshman and sophomore, I wanted to kill him. He could not stay out of trouble. He was just a pill. Well, so then you get to find out what's going on with this kid. He has been raised by his grandmother. His dad was shot when he was a baby. His dad was only 21 years old. He was shot here in Spokane. So the mom, distraught over that, moved to Ohio and left her son with her mother to be raised by her grandmother. And what I'm really proud about with Quentin is while he struggled his first few years, he is in advanced placement classes this year and doing really, really well as a senior. And I told him, I'm just so proud of you for how much you've grown up. So what are you going to do next year? I don't know. I go, well, what does your grandma say? We don't talk about it. See, that's where this gap lies and why we have to fill that for him. And so he and I are on a pretty much daily one-on-one about what we're going to do. He wants to play rugby. I said, I don't know if you can make a living doing that, but we'll look into it. Charlie is, this is a young lady I've known since she was a freshman. She is in my advisory. And she told me early on that she lives with her grandparents, but she was adopted by them. And for some reason, I could not get that out of my head, and I kept calling them grandparents. And one day, her mother, / grandmother, called me and just chewed my ass out for calling her grandmother and not her mother. And ever since then, I've been very clear, I only call them mom and dad. And Charlie she struggled. Her mom does live here in Spokane, and her mom also is a drug addict. She is a beautiful girl who just this last spring sat on this very stage right here in this room and at a Youth for Christ benefit dinner, she sang, and I had never heard her sing. She's not in our choir or anything like that. She's in ROTC for us. And I heard her sing, and she sounds like Alanis Morissette. It was like, oh my God, you're so good. So now she is pursuing music, and I'm really proud of her about that. Her dad did die last spring. While her dad was sick, he was sick for about, he was like 78 years old. He had been sick for a long time, and they got kicked out of their house. And for about most of her sophomore year, she lived in a hotel in North Spokane every day with her sister and her grandma while her dad well, her mom, and her dad was in the hospital. It was horrible. And yet she has survived all of this with this super positive attitude. It's amazing. This kid is amazing. And she is one of our best ROTC students. She is in our management class for ROTC. I don't think she's going to pursue military, although she would be good at it. And I am glad that she's going to pursue music because she's super talented. So those are my kids. That is our story. We cannot thank what you do enough. And not just with our federal grant, which was very difficult for people like you to deal with because it meant, calculating how the time was going to be for the extended day, extended year, and all that. But it's all the other support. And what's been great for me here in Spokane and for our school is that our folks downtown have been super supportive, and they've learned with us, and they've grown with us about this work. And they are so 100% behind us now. It is the reason why my staff can move forward and be successful and really help our kids, because of the work that you guys are doing. It really does make a difference. So I really appreciate you letting me talk about my school. I love doing that, and I hope the rest of your conference goes really well.
Lori Wyborney, everybody.